My name is Evan Rourke, and I'm a tech consultant who fixes problems for a living. Ironic, considering I couldn't fix the biggest problem in my own house, my wife, Melissa. It started on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen in Millbrook, Maine, the kind of evening where the autumn air carries that crisp promise of winter, and normal couples might discuss weekend plans or what to watch on Netflix. Instead, Melissa stood by our granite countertop, fidgeting with her wedding ring like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I think we need a break," she announced, not meeting my eyes. A break? Did I look like a Kit Kat bar? The thought almost made me laugh, but something in her posture stopped me cold. This wasn't one of our usual spats about my leaving dishes in the sink or her working late again. "What kind of break?" I asked, setting down my coffee mug with deliberate care. "Space. Time to think. You know how things have been between us lately." Her voice carried that practiced tone she used with difficult clients at her PR firm. Professional, distant, rehearsed. The thing is, I didn't know how things had been. Sure, we'd fallen into routines. She worked late, I handled the house. We passed each other like ships in the night. But I thought that was normal after 8 years of marriage. Apparently, I was wrong. "How long are we talking?" I kept my voice steady, though my mind was already racing through possibilities I didn't want to consider. "A few weeks, maybe a month. I'll stay at my sister Casey's place downtown." She finally looked at me, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. Relief. She was relieved to be leaving. That night, I sat in our living room, staring at the wedding photos on the mantel. Melissa in her white dress, radiant and laughing. Me in my rented tux, looking like the luckiest guy in Maine. 8 years ago, I'd been a struggling computer repair technician. She'd been a junior account executive with big dreams. We'd built something together, or so I thought. The house felt different without her constant presence. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the quiet before a storm. For 2 weeks I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no casual check-ins. When I tried reaching out, my messages went unanswered. Casey, her sister and eternal enabler, gave me the runaround whenever I called. "She needs time, Evan. You have to respect that." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Respect. Right. I respected it so much that I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake, wondering what I'd done wrong, replaying conversations, analyzing every interaction from the past few months. Had I been inattentive? Boring? Had I stopped trying without realizing it? By the end of the second week, I was a mess. My work suffered. I snapped at clients. I lived on takeout and stale coffee. Mrs. Gladys, our 70-something neighbor with a PhD in other people's business, started bringing me casseroles and unsolicited advice. "That girl always was too good for her own good," she'd mutter, bustling around my kitchen like she owned it. "Mark my words, Evan. Something's not right about this whole situation." I appreciated her concern, but I figured she was just being protective. Mrs. Gladys had watched our relationship from the beginning, and she'd always been fond of me, probably because I fixed her computer for free and actually listened to her stories about her late husband. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in my home office trying to focus on a client's network security audit when I heard Melissa's key in the front door. My heart jumped. Maybe she'd realized this break was a mistake. Maybe we could talk things through like adults. She looked good. Too good. Her hair was styled differently, and she was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Something expensive and flattering that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Hey," she said, hovering in the doorway like she wasn't sure she was welcome in her own house. "Hey yourself." I saved my work and turned to face her. "Good timing. I was just thinking about you." That was a lie. I'd been thinking about her constantly for 2 weeks. She had flowers in her hand, grocery store roses, the kind you grab when you need a quick gesture, and her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. "Evan, I need to tell you something." Here it comes, I thought, the real reason for the break. Another man, probably. Some smooth-talking executive from her office who wore better suits and drove a nicer car. But what came out of her mouth was worse. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. I want to come home." She was crying now, real tears that smeared her mascara and made her look vulnerable and human again. The Melissa I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. And that's when I knew she was lying. Not about the mistake part. That much was obvious. But about wanting to come home. She wasn't here because she missed me or realized she loved me. She was here because whatever she'd been chasing during our break had fallen through. I stood up slowly, studying her face. "What happened, Melissa? Did your backup plan not work out the way you hoped?" Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the real reason you wanted a break. And I'm talking about what went wrong that brought you back here looking like someone just broke your heart." The flowers trembled in her hands. "Evan, please, can't we just what? Pretend the last 2 weeks didn't happen? Pretend you didn't plan this whole thing?" I took a step closer, and she actually backed up. "Here's what I think happened. You met someone exciting and new who made you feel young again. You convinced yourself you were unhappy with me, with us, with this boring suburban life we'd built together. So you asked for a break, thinking you'd have your adventure, and then decide if you wanted to come back." Her silence was confirmation enough. "But it didn't work out, did it? He wasn't what you thought he'd be. Maybe he was just looking for a good time with a married woman. Maybe he got bored first. Either way, here you are, crawling back to safe, reliable Evan with grocery store flowers and crocodile tears." "It's not like that," she whispered. "Then tell me what it's like." But she couldn't, or wouldn't. She stood there in our doorway, holding those pathetic roses, and I saw our entire marriage with crystal clarity for the first time. I wasn't her husband. I was her safety net. "I think you should go back to Casey's," I said quietly. "Evan, please, we can work through this." "No," I said. "We can't, because you don't want to work through anything. You want me to pretend this never happened, so you can feel better about yourself. But I'm not going to do that." She left without another word, taking her flowers with her. That's when I decided to find out exactly what had happened during our break, and what I discovered made me realize that Melissa had seriously underestimated the man she'd married. The thing about being a tech consultant is that you develop certain skills. You learn to dig through systems, follow digital breadcrumbs, and piece together stories from fragments of data. You also learn that people are incredibly careless with their personal information. Melissa had left her laptop behind when she moved out. An oversight, she'd probably say if asked. But I knew better. She'd taken her work laptop and her tablet. This was her personal machine, the one she used for social media, shopping, and apparently coordinating affairs. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. When someone lies to your face and treats your marriage like a convenience store, certain ethical boundaries become more flexible. Her password was our anniversary date. Of course it was. Even while planning to cheat on me, she couldn't be bothered to change her security habits. What I found in her browser history, email, and text message backups painted a picture that was both exactly what I'd expected and somehow worse than I'd imagined. The name that kept appearing was Rick Duvall. Eric Duvall, technically, but he went by Rick because apparently Eric wasn't cool enough for a 38-year-old man who still drove a Camaro and posted gym selfies on Instagram. Rick was Melissa's college boyfriend, her first love, according to the increasingly intimate messages I found dating back 3 months. 3 months. She'd been planning this break for a quarter of a year, laying groundwork, building up to it like a corporate campaign. The messages started innocent enough. A friend request on social media, a comment on an old photo, Then private messages about catching up, reminiscing about old times. Classic emotional affair territory. But Rick was smoother than I'd given him credit for. He didn't push too hard too fast. Instead, he played the role of the understanding friend who'd always wondered what might have been. He listened to her complaints about our marriage with just the right amount of sympathy and suggestion. "You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are," he'd written. "Someone who makes you feel alive again." And Melissa ate it up like candy. By the time she asked for our break, they'd already booked hotel rooms. Plural. The Marriott downtown for their first weekend together. The boutique place on the coast for a romantic getaway the following week, all charged to a credit card I'd never seen before. But here's where it got interesting. The messages stopped being lovey-dovey around day 10 of our break. Suddenly, Rick was making excuses. He had work commitments, family obligations. He needed some space to figure things out. Sound familiar? The last message from Rick was brutal in its casual cruelty. "This has been fun, but I think we both know this isn't going anywhere serious. Take care of yourself, Mel." That message was dated 3 days before Melissa showed up at my door with flowers and tears. I sat back in my office chair staring at the screen. Part of me felt vindicated. I'd been right about everything, but mostly I felt something I hadn't expected. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but something colder and more focused. Melissa hadn't just cheated on me. She'd planned it methodically, executed it carefully, and then tried to manipulate me into taking her back when it fell apart. She'd treated our marriage like a backup plan and me like a fool. That's when I decided that if she wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real player looked like. My first call was to Joe Martinez, my best friend since high school and the most street-smart person I knew. Joe owned a auto repair shop downtown and had a network of contacts that rivaled the FBI. If you needed information, a favor, or just someone to watch your back, Joe was your guy. "Evan, how's married life treating you?" His voice boomed through the phone like always. "It's complicated. I need a favor." "Name it." I gave him the basics without going into the sordid details. Joe listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When I finished, there was a long pause. "So let me get this straight," he finally said. "Your wife asked for a break, disappeared for 2 weeks to shack up with some loser from college, got dumped, and now wants to come home like nothing happened?" "That's the summary, yeah." "And you want me to help you what exactly?" "I want to know everything about Rick Duvall. Where he works, where he lives, what kind of car he drives, who he hangs out with. Everything." Another pause. "Evan, you're not thinking about doing anything stupid, are you?" "Define stupid." "Anything that involves the police, the hospital, or the morgue." I laughed, despite myself. "Nothing like that. I just want to level the playing field. Melissa thinks she can manipulate me because I'm the nice guy, the reliable husband who'll always be there to pick up the pieces. I want to show her that she's wrong." "All right," Joe said. "Give me 24 hours. While I waited for Joe's intelligence report, I started phase 2 of my investigation, Melissa's support network. If she'd been planning this affair for months, she hadn't done it alone. Someone had been covering for her, providing alibis, maybe even encouraging her. The obvious suspect was Casey, her sister and best friend. Casey was 2 years younger than Melissa, but had always been the more rebellious one. Divorced twice by 35, Casey treated relationships like rental cars, fun while they lasted, but nothing to get attached to. I'd never liked Casey, and she'd never liked me. She thought Melissa had settled when she married me, and she wasn't shy about expressing that opinion. During family gatherings, she'd make little comments about how Melissa could have done better, how she was wasting her potential in our small town. Now I wondered if those comments had been more than just casual cruelty. I found my answer in Melissa's text messages with Casey. Not only had Casey known about the affair from the beginning, she'd actively encouraged it. "You only live once, girl. If Rick makes you happy, go for it." Evan will never know if you're smart about it. You deserve some excitement in your life. Casey had even provided specific alibis, telling me that Melissa was with her on nights when she was actually with Rick. She'd answered my calls during those 2 weeks, lying smoothly about Melissa needing time and space. The betrayal stung more than I'd expected. I'd trusted Casey, included her in family events, helped her move apartments, fixed her computer more times than I could count. And she'd looked me in the eye and lied to protect Melissa's affair. But Casey had made one crucial mistake. She'd documented everything in text messages, creating a detailed record of the conspiracy. Screenshots of hotel reservations, discussions of cover stories, even jokes about how clueless I was. Poor Evan, she'd texted Melissa. He has no idea what's coming. No, Casey, poor you. Because now I had evidence of everything, and I was going to use it. My phone rang just as I finished reading through the Casey texts. Joe's name appeared on the screen. "I've got your information," he said without preamble. "You want the good news or the bad news first?" "Give me the bad news." Rick Duvall is exactly the kind of guy you'd expect your wife to cheat with. Drives a leased Camaro, works in sales for some tech startup that's probably going to fold within a year, lives in one of those overpriced apartment complexes with a gym and a pool. He's got 3 different dating profiles active right now, and according to my sources, he's been working his way through half the single women in town. And the good news? The good news is that he's also exactly the kind of guy who's going to be easy to mess with. He's all image and no substance. Push him hard enough, and he'll fold like a cheap suit. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Joe, you're a good friend. I'm a great friend. Which is why I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you sure you want to do this? Sometimes it's better to just walk away. I thought about Melissa's tears, her flowers, her carefully rehearsed apology. I thought about Casey's texts and Rick's casual dismissal. I thought about 8 years of marriage reduced to a backup plan. "I'm sure," I said. "All right then, when do we start?" The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not entirely a lie, since the whole situation had left me feeling physically nauseous. But mostly, I needed a day to prepare for what was coming. Melissa had texted me 3 times since our confrontation, each message more desperate than the last. She wanted to meet for coffee. She wanted to talk things through. She wanted to explain everything. I ignored them all. Instead, I spent the morning organizing my evidence. Screenshots of text messages, browser histories, credit card statements I'd found in her email. I created a timeline of the affair, cross-referencing her lies with the documented truth. It was like building a legal case, which in a way I supposed it was. Around noon, Mrs. Gladys knocked on my door with a tuna casserole and her usual dose of neighborhood gossip. "That wife of yours came by Casey's place last night in quite a state," she announced, bustling into my kitchen without invitation, crying and carrying on loud enough to wake the whole block. Mrs. Gladys lived 3 houses down from Casey's apartment building, and she had a direct line of sight to the parking lot from her bedroom window. She also had the hearing of a bat and the curiosity of a journalist. "Is that so?" I asked, accepting the casserole with appropriate gratitude. "Oh, yes. And there was a man with her. Tall fellow, dark hair, driving one of those loud sports cars. They had quite the argument right there in the parking lot." My pulse quickened. What kind of argument? The kind where she was doing most of the talking and he was doing most of the walking away. Mrs. Gladys settled into one of my kitchen chairs like she was planning to stay a while. Couldn't make out all the words, but I definitely heard her say something about giving him another chance. So Rick had shown up after all, probably feeling guilty about his harsh dismissal, or maybe just looking for another easy hookup. Either way, it sounded like Melissa had tried to rekindle things and been rejected again. "How long did this go on?" I asked. "Oh, maybe 10 minutes. Then he got in his car and drove off, and she went inside. But here's the interesting part." Mrs. Gladys leaned forward conspiratorially. "About an hour later, she came back out and got in her car. Followed him. I nearly choked on my coffee. She followed him? Like something out of a detective show. Waited until he was almost out of sight, then pulled out after him. Didn't come back until almost 3 in the morning. This was getting better by the minute. Melissa, in her desperation to salvage her failed affair, was now stalking Rick. The woman who'd asked for a break to find herself was apparently finding herself to be pathetic. Mrs. Gladys stayed for another hour, sharing every detail she'd observed about the situation. Apparently, Casey had been coming and going at odd hours, looking shifty. There had been multiple late-night phone calls on the apartment balcony, and yesterday she'd seen Casey burning papers in the building's dumpster. Burning papers? I asked. Big stack of them. Looked like letters or printouts. Made quite the smoke. Covering their tracks, probably. Getting rid of evidence of the affair now that it had gone sideways. But they were too late. I already had everything I needed. After Mrs. Gladys left, I called my brother Derek. He lived about an hour away and worked for a security company that installed surveillance systems for businesses. More importantly, he'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and had a very practical approach to problem solving. Evan, what's going on? You sound strange. I gave him the abbreviated version of events. Derek listened with the same focused attention he'd probably given mission briefings in the Army. So what do you need from me? He asked when I finished. Advice, mostly, and maybe some technical support. What kind of technical support? The legal kind. I want to document everything that happens from here on out. Conversations, confrontations, whatever comes next. But I want to do it right, without crossing any lines that'll get me in trouble later. Derek was quiet for a moment. You planning to divorce her? I don't know yet. Right now, I just want her to understand that actions have consequences. Fair enough. I can help with that. But Evan, you need to be smart about this. Don't do anything that can be traced back to you. Don't break any laws, and don't let your anger make you stupid. I won't. Good, because the best revenge is the kind where you never have to explain yourself to a judge. That afternoon, I drove to Joe's auto shop. He was under the hood of a pickup truck, but he slid out when he saw me approaching. You look better, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. More focused. I feel more focused. What else did you find out about our friend Rick? Joe grinned. Oh, you're going to love this. Remember how I said he works for a tech startup? Well, it turns out that startup is having some serious financial problems. Word is, they're going to lay off half their sales team within the month. Meaning Rick's about to be unemployed. And stuck with payments on a car he can't afford and an apartment that costs more than most people's mortgages. Joe leaned against the truck's bumper. But that's not the best part. There's more? There's more. Apparently, our boy Rick has been telling people around town that he's got a rich married girlfriend who's going to leave her husband for him. Been bragging about it at the gym, at bars, anywhere guys gather to talk nonsense. I felt my jaw tighten. He's been talking about Melissa? Not by name, but yeah, describing her, talking about her job, even mentioned that her husband works in tech. Half the town probably knows about the affair by now. This changed things. It was one thing for Melissa to humiliate me privately. But if Rick had been spreading details of their affair around town, treating it like a conquest to brag about, then she'd humiliated me publicly without even realizing it. There's something else, Joe continued. My cousin Maria works at the Marriott downtown. She says Rick's been bringing different women there pretty regularly, including your wife, but not just your wife. He was cheating on her while she was cheating on me? Looks that way. Maria says he had another woman there just 2 nights ago, blonde, younger than Melissa, drove a BMW. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The whole situation was so absurd, so perfectly awful, that laughter was the only reasonable response. Melissa had thrown away our marriage for a serial cheater who'd been using her as one option among many. She'd risked everything for a man who was bragging about their affair to strangers and sleeping with other women on the side. And now, she wanted to come home because he'd finally gotten bored with her. "You okay?" Joe asked, looking concerned. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. Absolutely perfect. That evening, I got a phone call from Casey. She'd never called me before, which made this conversation especially interesting. "Evan, we need to talk." "Do we?" "It's about Melissa. She's really struggling right now, and I think you're being unnecessarily cruel." Unnecessarily cruel. That was rich, coming from someone who'd helped orchestrate the whole affair. "Casey, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. I know about Rick. I know about the hotels. I know about the planning and the lies and your role in all of it. So before you lecture me about being cruel, you might want to consider your own behavior." Silence on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you think you know," she finally said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "I know everything. Text messages, emails, credit card receipts, alibis you provided. Everything. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop calling me, stop defending Melissa, and stop pretending you're an innocent bystander in this mess. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of sister and friend you really are. You're bluffing. Try me." She hung up without another word. An hour later, Melissa called. "Evan, please, we need to talk face to face. I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Melissa. I know about Rick. I know about the affair. I know about the planning and the lies and Casey's involvement. I know about the hotels and the credit cards and the whole pathetic story. How do you—" She caught herself, but it was too late. "How do I know? Because you're not as smart as you think you are. And because the man you threw our marriage away for has been bragging about sleeping with you to half the town." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Ask around. Ask your friends at work if anyone's heard interesting rumors lately. Ask the people at your gym if Rick's name has come up in conversation. Ask anyone who will give you an honest answer." I could hear her crying, but it didn't move me the way it once would have. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "No, Melissa. You made a series of calculated choices over several months. You planned an affair, executed it carefully, and tried to manipulate me into being your safety net when it fell apart. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. Please, Evan, I love you." "No, you don't. You love the idea of me as your backup plan. You love having someone reliable to come home to when your adventures don't work out. But you don't love me enough to be faithful, and you don't respect me enough to be honest." "What do you want from me?" It was a good question. What did I want? An apology? An explanation? Some kind of justice? "I want you to understand that actions have consequences," I said, "and I want you to stop pretending you're the victim in this situation." What does that mean? It means you're about to find out what happens when you underestimate someone. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The anger was still there, but it had crystallized into something more useful. Purpose. Today, I would start showing Melissa and her accomplices that their actions had consequences. My first stop was Melissa's office. Hartwell and Associates occupied the third floor of a downtown building, and I'd been there dozens of times for company parties and client events. Everyone knew me as Melissa's husband, the quiet tech guy who fixed their computers and made small talk about sports. I arrived just before lunch, carrying a bouquet of flowers and wearing my best apologetic husband expression. "Evan," Lila, the receptionist, brightened when she saw me. "How sweet. Are those for Melissa?" "They are. I know she's been staying with Casey while we work through some things, but I wanted to surprise her at work." I gave Lila my most sheepish smile. "You know how it is. Sometimes us husbands need to make grand gestures." Lila giggled. "She's in a meeting with Mr. Hartwell right now, but she should be out soon. You can wait in her office if you want." Perfect. I'd been hoping for exactly this scenario. Melissa's office was a shrine to her professional ambitions. Awards on the walls, photos from corporate events, business books arranged just so on her shelves. Her computer was locked, but I wasn't here for digital evidence. I was here to plant seeds. I placed the flowers on her desk with a note. For my wife, who deserves only the best. Love, Evan. Then I settled into the chair across from her desk to wait. 20 minutes later, Melissa walked in and stopped short when she saw me. Evan, what are you doing here? Bringing flowers to my wife. Is that not allowed? She closed the door behind her and approached her desk cautiously, like I might be booby-trapped. We need to talk, she said. I agree, but not here. Too many ears. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Why don't you come by the house tonight? We can have a proper conversation. Really? Hope flickered in her eyes. Really. 8 o'clock. Come alone. I kissed her cheek and left, nodding pleasantly to Lila on my way out. The first seed was planted. My next stop was Rick's workplace, a startup called TechFlow Solutions that occupied a cramped suite in a converted warehouse. According to Joe's intelligence, the company was hemorrhaging money and looking for excuses to cut staff. I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street and waited. At 12:30, Rick emerged with 2 other men, heading toward a restaurant down the block. I followed at a distance, then took a table where I could observe their conversation. Rick was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, conventionally handsome in a generic way, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than he could afford. He talked with his hands, laughed too loudly, and checked his phone constantly. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read body language. Rick was agitated about something. He kept running his hands through his hair and glancing around the restaurant like he expected trouble. When they finished eating, I followed them back to their office building. Rick split off from the group and took a phone call in the parking lot. He was far enough away that I couldn't make out words, but his posture screamed frustration. After he went inside, I called the company's main number. TechFlow Solutions, this is Jennifer. Hi Jennifer, this is Mike from Hartwell & Associates. I'm calling about Rick Duvall. We're considering him for a consulting contract, but I wanted to verify his employment status first. Oh. Jennifer's voice became guarded. I'm not really supposed to give out employment information. I understand. Maybe I could speak with his supervisor? This is a significant contract opportunity, and we want to make sure we're working with the right people. Hold on. Let me transfer you. A minute later, a gruff voice came on the line. This is Bob Peterson, sales manager. You're asking about Rick? That's right. We're looking at bringing him on for a project, but we want to make sure he's going to be available for the next few months. Bob snorted. Well, he's going to be available all right. We're restructuring the sales team next week. Rick's one of the ones being let go. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. Between you and me, Rick's been more focused on his personal life than his professional responsibilities lately. Probably for the best that he moves on. I thanked Bob and hung up, smiling. Rick was about to lose his job, and his supervisor had already written him off as unprofessional. The second seed was planted. That afternoon, I met Derek at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. He brought a small bag of electronic equipment that looked innocent enough, but could record high-quality audio and video. This is all legal, he assured me. You can record conversations in your own home without anyone's consent. Just don't take it outside or use it to record phone calls. What about confrontations in public places? Depends on the state and the specific circumstances. Maine's a one-party consent state, so as long as you're part of the conversation, you're generally okay. But be careful. And remember, the goal is to document what happens, not to provoke something that'll get you in trouble. I pocketed the recording device and shook Derek's hand. Thanks for this. Just promise me you'll be smart about whatever you're planning. I promise. At 7:30 that evening, I was ready. The recording equipment was set up and tested. I'd prepared talking points and anticipated Melissa's likely responses. Most importantly, I'd prepared myself emotionally for what was coming. Melissa arrived exactly at 8, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the dress she'd worn on our first anniversary. The symbolism was so heavy-handed it was almost insulting. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," she said as I let her into the house. "Thank you for coming. Wine? Please." I poured 2 glasses and handed her one, then settled into my armchair. She took the couch, crossing her legs and arranging herself in what she probably thought was an appealing pose. "Evan, I want you to know how sorry I am. I know I hurt you, and I know I made terrible choices, but I want to make it right." "Tell me about Rick." The directness of the question caught her off guard. "What about him?" "Tell me about your relationship with him, when it started, how long it went on, what you thought was going to happen." "I don't think that's productive." "Melissa, I know everything. I've seen the text messages, the emails, the hotel receipts. I know about the planning and Casey's involvement and Rick's bragging around town. So don't lie to me anymore. Just tell me the truth." She stared into her wine glass for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "It started about 3 months ago. He reached out on social media just to catch up. We started talking, and I remembered how I used to feel about him, young and excited and alive." She paused. "I felt like I'd lost that with us." "So you decided to have an affair." "I decided to see what it would be like to feel that way again. The break was supposed to give me time to figure out if what I was feeling was real or just nostalgia." "And what did you figure out?" "That I was an idiot, that Rick isn't the person I remembered, that what we had was just fantasy and nostalgia and middle-aged foolishness." "What specifically happened with Rick?" She shifted uncomfortably. "He wasn't interested in anything serious. He made that clear pretty quickly. I thought maybe if I gave him space he'd realize what he was giving up, but he didn't." "So you followed him to his apartment 2 nights ago." Her face went white. "How do you know that?" "I know a lot of things, Melissa. I know Rick's been sleeping with other women the whole time he was sleeping with you. I know he's been bragging about your affair to people around town. I know he's about to lose his job. And I know you've been calling and texting him constantly since he dumped you." She started crying then, real tears this time. "I was so stupid, Evan. So incredibly stupid. I threw away everything good in my life for someone who didn't care about me at all." "Yes, you did. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it, rebuild what we had." "No, we can't." "Why not?" "I know I messed up, but people recover from affairs. Marriages survive this kind of thing." I leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. "Because this wasn't just an affair, Melissa. This was a months-long deception involving multiple people. You didn't make a mistake in a moment of weakness. You planned and executed a campaign to betray me while using me as your safety net. That's not how it was. That's exactly how it was. You kept me around to pay the bills and provide stability while you pursued your fantasy. You involved Casey in covering for you. You lied to my face dozens of times, and now that your fantasy has collapsed, you want me to pretend none of it happened. I want us to work through it. What you want is for me to make this easy for you. You want me to forgive you quickly so you don't have to live with the consequences of what you've done, but I'm not going to do that. Then what do you want?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. "I want you to understand that your choices have destroyed our marriage. I want you to stop pretending you're the victim here. And I want you to prepare yourself for what comes next." "What comes next?" I turned back to face her. "You're going to find out what happens when you treat someone like a fool, starting tomorrow." She left shortly after that, confused and frightened. Good. It was time for her to start experiencing some of the uncertainty and fear she'd put me through. The real confrontation was just beginning. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. It was time for Melissa and her accomplices to face the consequences of their actions, and I intended to make those consequences as public and humiliating as they'd made my betrayal. My first call was to Melissa's boss, Richard Hartwell. I'd met him several times at company events, and he'd always struck me as a man who valued reputation and discretion above almost everything else. "Richard, this is Evan Rourke, Melissa's husband. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Evan, good to hear from you. Melissa mentioned you two were working through some things. I hope everything's okay. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to give you a heads up about something that might affect the company." I could hear the wariness creeping into his voice. What kind of something? "Well, it's come to my attention that Melissa's been having an affair with a man named Rick Duval. The relationship has been going on for several months, and unfortunately, Rick's been talking about it around town. He's been describing Melissa's job, mentioning Hartwell and Associates by name, even discussing confidential client information he learned from her." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "Are you certain about this, Evan?" "I have documentation, text messages, hotel receipts, witnesses who've heard Rick discussing the affair and mentioning company details. I thought you should know in case any clients or competitors have heard these rumors." "I see. And why are you telling me this?" "Because I respect you and the company, and I don't think Melissa's personal choices should reflect badly on Hartwell and Associates. But I also think you deserve to know what's been happening." Another long pause. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Evan. I'll handle it from here." "I understand this puts you in a difficult position, Richard. I'm sorry about that." "It's not your fault. Take care of yourself." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Within an hour, Melissa would be called into Richard's office for a very uncomfortable conversation about professional conduct and discretion. Her career, which she'd worked so hard to build, was about to take a serious hit. My next call was to Joe. "It's time," I said simply. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." "All right. Give me 2 hours." Joe had connections throughout the service industry in our town. Bartenders, waitresses, gym employees, hotel staff, people who saw everything and talked to everyone. Within 2 hours, carefully crafted rumors about Rick Duval would be circulating through every social hub in the area. The rumors wouldn't be lies, exactly, just strategic presentations of the truth. Rick had been bragging about sleeping with a married woman. Rick had been cheating on his girlfriend with multiple women. Rick was about to lose his job due to unprofessional behavior. Rick's expensive lifestyle was built on debt and delusion. By the end of the day, Rick Duval's reputation would be as damaged as mine had been when he started bragging about his conquest. At noon, my phone rang. Melissa's name appeared on the screen. "Evan, what did you do?" Her voice was shaking with rage and panic. "I don't know what you mean." Richard called me into his office. "He knows about Rick. He knows about everything. That's unfortunate." "Did you tell him?" I shared some concerns about company confidentiality. Richard's a smart man. I'm sure he drew his own conclusions. "You're trying to destroy my career." "I'm not trying to do anything, Melissa. I'm simply making sure that the truth comes to light. You made choices that affected both of us. Now, you get to live with the consequences of those choices. This is vindictive and cruel. This is justice. You humiliated me publicly by having an affair with someone who bragged about it around town. Now, you get to experience some public humiliation yourself. I'm your wife. You were my wife. You stopped being my wife the moment you decided Rick Duval was more important than our marriage vows." She hung up on me, but I knew she'd call back. Desperate people always called back. That afternoon, Derek arrived with more surveillance equipment and a grim expression. "I've been thinking about this situation," he said as we set up cameras around my house, "and I think you need to prepare for the possibility that things might escalate." "What do you mean?" "I mean that cornered people do desperate things. Melissa's career is in jeopardy, Her affair partner is about to become a social pariah, and her support system is crumbling. She might try something dramatic. Like what? Like showing up here with Rick to confront you. Like trying to turn this around and make you the villain. Like calling the police and claiming you're harassing or threatening her. I hadn't considered that possibility, but Derek was right. Melissa was used to being in control, used to managing situations through manipulation and charm. When those tools failed, she might resort to more desperate measures. What do you suggest? Document everything. Record every conversation. Make sure you're never alone with her without witnesses or surveillance. And whatever you do, don't give her ammunition to use against you. We spent the next hour setting up discrete cameras that would record any interactions at my house. Everything would be documented. Everything would be admissible in court if necessary. At 6 o'clock, Casey called. "You need to stop this right now," she said without preamble. "Stop what?" "You know what? Melissa's boss is threatening to fire her. People are talking about Rick all over town. You're destroying their lives." "I'm not destroying anything, Casey. I'm simply revealing what they chose to do. If their lives are being destroyed, it's because of their own actions." She made a mistake. People make mistakes. She made a series of calculated choices over several months. With your help. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of behavior. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. Something you and Melissa should try sometime. What do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to stop this? I want Melissa to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to understand that helping someone betray their spouse makes you complicit in that betrayal. And I want both of you to stop treating me like I'm stupid. Fine. You want to play hardball? We can play hardball too. Bring it on, Casey. I've got nothing left to lose. She hung up, and I immediately called Derek. "They're planning something," I told him. "Casey just threatened me." "What kind of threat?" "The vague kind, but she sounded desperate and angry." "All right, I'm coming over. Don't answer the door for anyone until I get there." Derek arrived within 30 minutes, and we settled in to wait. We didn't have to wait long. At 8:15, 2 cars pulled into my driveway. Melissa got out of the first one, followed by Casey. Rick emerged from the second car, along with another man I didn't recognize. "Here we go," Derek muttered, checking the recording equipment. "Remember, stay calm. Don't let them provoke you into doing anything stupid." I opened the front door before they could knock, stepping onto the porch with Derek beside me. "Melissa, Casey, Rick." I nodded to each of them in turn, then looked at the stranger. "And you are?" "Brad Morrison," the man said. "I'm Rick's friend." "I see. And what brings you all to my home this evening?" Melissa stepped forward, her face flushed with anger and desperation. "We need to talk, Evan. All of us. This has gone far enough." "I'm listening." "Not out here. Inside." "No. Anything you have to say to me, you can say right here." Rick stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he was trying to intimidate me. "Look, man, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to back off. You're messing with people's lives." "I'm messing with people's lives?" I almost laughed. "Rick, you've been sleeping with my wife for months and bragging about it around town. You've humiliated me publicly and treated my marriage like a joke. And now you're upset because there are consequences for your actions?" "That's between me and Melissa. It's got nothing to do with her job or my reputation." "It has everything to do with both. You made it public when you started bragging. You made it professional when you discussed confidential information Melissa shared with you. You don't get to compartmentalize your choices now that they're backfiring." Brad stepped up beside Rick, trying to look menacing. "Maybe you should listen to what Rick's telling you." Derek moved slightly, positioning himself between me and the 2 men. "And maybe you should think carefully about what you're doing right now," Derek said quietly. "Because threatening someone on their own property while being recorded isn't the smartest move you could make." "Recorded?" Casey looked around frantically. Every word, I confirmed. Video and audio, all perfectly legal. Melissa started crying again, but this time it looked calculated rather than genuine. Evan, please. I know I hurt you, but this has to stop. You're destroying everything I've worked for. You destroyed everything you worked for when you decided to have an affair. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about what happened. The truth? Rick stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. You want the truth? Your wife came to me. She pursued me. She was desperate for someone to make her feel alive again because you're boring and pathetic. Derek tensed beside me, but I held up a hand to stop him. Is that what you told yourself, Rick? That she pursued you? Because I've seen the text messages. I know who initiated contact, who suggested the hotels, who planned the whole thing, and I know who got bored first and dumped her when the novelty wore off. Rick's face went red. You don't know anything. I know you've been cheating on her with other women the whole time. I know you're about to lose your job. I know you can't afford that car or that apartment. And I know that in about 6 months, when the bills come due, you're going to be broke and alone. That's enough, Melissa shouted. Both of you, just stop. No, Melissa, it's not enough. Not nearly enough. I looked directly at her. You want this to stop? Here's what you do. You accept responsibility for your choices. You stop playing the victim. You apologize publicly to everyone you lied to. And you leave me alone. And if I don't, then tomorrow I start sharing the really interesting evidence. The hotel security footage Joe's friend pulled. The credit card records showing exactly how much you spent on your affair. The text messages where you and Casey laughed about how clueless I was. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't. Try me. Rick made a move toward me, but Derek stepped forward and Rick thought better of it. This isn't over, Rick said. Yes, it is, I replied. Your part in this ended the moment you decided to humiliate my wife in public by bragging about sleeping with her. Now you get to live with the consequences. They left without another word, but I knew this was just the beginning of the end. Tomorrow, I would finish what they had started. The final confrontation was coming, and I was ready for it.